clear to me that if I really want to be a good, powerful leader, it's about letting go and releasing and not holding on. And it's about building into the lives of other men and supporting them and doing all that I can to support them so that more men's lives can change. Because if I do this, that's going to slow leadership. And it's also going to get in the way of seeing these men who have come and had this initial experience and then have come and done second level weekends. It's also going to impact their growth and their transformation as leaders. And so do I want to make it about me and my ego? And do I need to shine more brightly? Or is it about building into the lives of others and supporting them to be able to be the best that they can be so that they can pass it on and impact the lives of other men as well?
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Welcome to the Crucible Podcast. This is Jay Mountjoy. I'm here with Greg Huston. We're going to be discussing whatever ends up coming up to discuss. I'm particularly curious about the early days of the Crucible, but I want to give you a quick moment, Greg, to just introduce yourself, however you usually do that.
Hi, my name is Greg Huston, and I'm honored to be part of this call and grateful for what God has done in the Crucible Project, and grateful to be able to have some time to share here with you.
I can mirror that also. Honored, grateful. I'm really curious as we just kind of go back and tell the story of the beginning of this. What did your life look like? What was kind of going on, just the short version that led you into the first work that you did, the first men's work that you did, and then how that impacted you, and then, how that moves the story forward.
Yeah, so I was getting to a point in my life where just moving ahead, pressing forward in my own strength, started to not work. And I was, things were coming up in my life where I couldn't deny it. It just wasn't internal. It was having two daughters who were growing into their teen years. And
I won't speak from experience, but I would imagine that would bring most men to a point of reality. Maybe, I don't know, a good way to say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. It was like, I could go in my own strength and put my head down and press forward for so long. And then it was getting to a point where it wasn't a matter of I need to press harder. Working harder wasn't doing it. I was trying harder, and it just wasn't changing things. And I realized that I needed to go to another level and begin to dig deeper and look at some of the things that were going on inside me, things from my past that I hadn't looked at, that I was aware that I needed to begin to look at if I really wanted to become the man, the husband, the father that I wanted to be.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So, needing to dig deeper, but then also it sounds like some of those other things from your past were maybe starting to bubble up in different ways and kind of present themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a lot of brokenness in my family of origin. There were 4 divorces between my 2 parents.
Wow.
And so, and my mom after the initial divorce, basically crashed my dad to us. She was angry and resentful at him, and there was a lot to be angry and resentful about. And he struggled with alcoholism. But then I was the only son, and so I think I took those things that I heard her saying to me and my sisters to a different level in terms of who I was. And so I really started struggling with that. And it made it, difficult as I saw it begin to impact my life and relationships.
Yeah. So, one of the things that seems important to me that I would point out was this idea of, we come across men as we share this podcast and give people a sense that, it's for people who have not been to a weekend. So we don't give details about the weekend. We'll talk about it and your experiences for sure. But just this idea of like, oh, I don't need a weekend. I haven't hit bottom or I'm not an alcoholic or something like that. And so it's always really important, I think, to highlight this work is for the betterment of well people. And my story is none of us get through unscathed through childhood and into adulthood and into manhood. And if nothing else, have never been initiated. Very, very few of us have been initiated. So as one thing that I would highlight is this, like, hey, I haven't hit bottom. This weekend is not for people who are like, totally down. It's like, no, is weekends for everybody. My story is for everybody at the right time in their life. And it really sounded like it was, you knew or sensed it was the right time for you.
Yes, I was. So I started by going and seeing counselors, therapists for help. And that certainly was some help. My wife and I went also and did some things around our marriage. There was one man that I was meeting with in particular who had done a Mankind Project Weekend that is basically a secular version, if you will, of the Crucible Project. And I got to a point where I was desperate to change and do something that would go deeper to help me change so that I could be that husband, father, man that I wanted to be. So I went and did this Mankind Project Weekend. I'd been a pastor, and I realized that I wasn't the only man that I'd seen in the church who struggled with a lot of the issues that I was wrestling with. And so I began to wonder, boy, there's got to be a way to create something so that these men who are in the church could have something where they could go on a faith-based weekend, where there could be some trust around that and be done in a Christian framework and context, and began to talk and work with other men. And we slowly began to develop this Christian weekend for men to be able to go and do the work in their hearts and their lives around their past hurt and wounds and begin to get some healing and some deeper transformation so they could become the men, have some help to become the men that they wanted to be.
Unprompted, unscripted. I was on another Zoom call with the leadership of the Crucible here in Colorado. And one of the leaders, won't embarrass him and say his name right now, but as we checked in, we're praying, we're starting the meeting, and he said, I am so grateful for Greg Huston for taking this work from the Mankind Project and starting. And I didn't even tell him that I was going to be talking with you later in the week.
Yeah.
And he just was able to echo. So I just wanted to throw that shine on you, that work, that decision, that process. Yeah, another man here in Colorado who leads weekends just said, the impact I'm seeing that this work is doing has been huge. And just from out of the blue, just came up with that to remind and honor you of that. So
Thank you,
to
Jay.
yeah, to go back kind of one half step back, maybe you came out of your weekend, and what's the how long in between? How much work have you done before you kind of then start planting the seeds for what would become the Crucible Project? Is it like weeks or months or years, or what was the journey? What were the steps and kind of the time frame that it took from your first weekend until moving forward, yeah, and starting what would become the Crucible Project?
So I did my initial weekend with the Mankind Project in December of '96. Took me to places in my soul that I had never been before. So I got involved in a group with the Mankind Project. But as a pastor of a church, I had this real burden for other Christian men that they could experience something like I experienced in a Christian framework. That's what I started working on, was trying to develop some kind of weekend that was deeply experiential, because all that I had done as a Christian man and as a pastor was basically kind of from head to head, if I can say that.
Yeah, yeah. I heard the phrase neck up. Everything
Yes.
from the neck up. Yeah,
Yeah.
that resonated with me. Yeah.
And so I had experienced something that went beyond my head and my neck and took me down to my soul, where
Mm.
I began to peel away some of the layers that I had built up that protected me from the pain that I had experienced in my childhood and through the divorces of my parents growing up. I began to go down and began to, face those layers of pain and
Mm.
woundedness. Going and doing these weekends, I could do it in a context with other men who were also beginning to address those things. That just was extremely powerful to begin to do that, quote, soul, unquote, work where I'd never done anything like that before. And so that was just really powerful. And I really had a longing to be able to somehow take this back to the church and the Christian community, because I felt like there were so many men who were living in the same
Mm.
on the same path that I had been on, and that they could really benefit by going to this whole deeper level
Yeah.
that my life had just opened up to. So that
Yeah.
was my passion that I
Mm.
began to develop after I did my weekend, which
I,
was December '96.
I think you just described my life had just opened up to, and resonates with me that after having done my initial weekend, I had a new lens and was able to see other men in a new light, and be like, oh yeah, I can see some of my own woundedness, some of my own work in other men. And then, yeah, your description of facing the pain and all the layers of things that had protected you from that. And then, yeah, seeing that in other men, it sounds like, and
Yeah,
wanting to start to share this with other men in the church.
yeah.
All right, yeah. So moving forward, you're working with a few other men, and what are the kind of the first steps, maybe the first baby steps?
Well, so I also got involved in coaching and was doing some training in coaching people. And so I ended up meeting some men who were in similar places that I was. I ended up talking with men and doing some coaching with them.
Mm,
And, there were some similarities that were showing up,
mm,
so that we ended up putting a men's group together of men that I was coaching individually. We started meeting in February 2000 with a number of these men that I was doing coaching. And so the first men's group started in February of 2000, and there were like 4 or 5 men that I started meeting with. And then in March of 2000, I met with a guy named David Carr, who at one point was running the Mankind Project and found out that he also had a background in the Christian community.
Mm.
And so I ended up going and doing a leadership weekend that was part of the Mankind Project that David was leading, and then developed somewhat of a relationship with David. Then went did that leadership weekend, developed something of a relationship with him. And so we ended up talking and working together. And in February of 2002, we did our first men's weekend that was just with a handful of men, and almost fell apart the first night that we started, because we started the process, and Friday night, the process is what we call descent. And so we were descending and had put the men in a group, and one of the men was like, I'm not doing this. And so one of the men said, I'm out of here, I'm leaving. And so we were from 5 men to 4 men.
Wow.
And we ended up calling the 4 men out of the room and ended up talking about, whether they wanted to continue or not. And so it felt like the weekend was hanging by a thread and almost fell apart. Somehow there was enough to stand on so that we were able to move forward with those 4 men and go through the weekend. But it was really challenging and difficult. Well, and like I said, came within a thread of falling apart.
That is one of the anecdotal stories I've heard, is that, it started rough. And I'm curious, personal curiosity, what, as you get started, what is your experience? What emotions are going on from you? And then what did you kind of learn from that very first weekend of losing, 20% of your participants?
Well, I was sad and scared, certainly at the time. I was scared that everything was going to fall apart, and was sad for the loss of this man and potentially losing the whole weekend after working so hard to get here, since I'd done my weekend, and then, building these relationships with these men through coaching. Was sad for the loss, and sad that I was scared that it was going to all fall apart. So my scare and my sadness was around that.
I also honored, like, the very first start here. It is always up to the participants, right? Where they are in their journey, if they're ready to step into this, and if they need to step out, let's honor that also. Okay, and then learning. Does anything pop to your head? Any, done all this work, put all this together, and was there anything that came up for you around that?
In terms of what I learned from it? As far as it almost falling apart at the
learning, or maybe I'd expand that to the growing for you as a leader.
There's learning in preparing men for a weekend. So, we've gone through, now we have a whole interview process where we, talk with men and ask them questions and interview them, ask them if they have any other questions after we, go through our list of questions and interviewing them, which helps prepare them and build a bridge for the weekend, realizing that they likely have never done anything like this in their lives. And so I think that helped us begin to get more in men's shoes and begin to prepare them and build bridges for the weekend, that it's not jumping from 0 to 100, but we have some things in place which can be steps for them to make that leap, hopefully somewhat easier, though, we don't want to take away the challenges. And so, that's difficult this was a challenging weekend. We're going to challenge you. We're not taking that away. And yet we want to do it in a way that also works for you to be able to trust us and be willing to take these major steps in your life.
That makes a lot of sense. And I can think of times where I've been guilty of, having been on the other side of my initial weekend, and, spending 2 years in a group, doing the second level weekends with the Crucible, just taking for granted where I was and where other men are when they're starting. And, saying going from like 0 to 60 or 0 to 100, I'm like, oh, it's like 0 to free fall, right? Like you are going to have to jump off that cliff. And how can we support you to get up to that? You still have to jump.
Yes, yes.
All
And,
right. Yeah.
and how can we set it up for success to make that leap
Mm-hmm.
and not, like I said, just make it 0 to 100.
You've done the very first weekend in what would eventually become the Crucible Project on, what are we on? 3 continents and however many countries and states. After you end that weekend, what's your thought? Like, oh, we've got to do more of this. Did you just survive it, or how did that go for you?
I thought it went really well to see the impact that it had on those 4 men who changed and went through the process of the whole weekend, and seeing them at the end of their weekend and how the weekend had impacted them positively. Then it was like, yes, we have something here upon which to build. And these men wanted to do that. They wanted to get involved in a group where they could continue to meet as men and build on their experience. And so I led a group with these men. And then, we began to build from that point to a point where through them that we began to reach out to other men that they might know. And we're able to create a second group from that. And from that group, a second weekend. So we were able to build on that. And it was just really wonderful to see the impact that the group was having on these men and how they built in and wanted to reach out to other men. And then they became part of the staff of the next weekend that we had. And they were, like I said, reaching out to men and inviting them. So it was, growing beyond me, and it was building on the men who had had the experience and them coming and giving back to men so that they could also see the impact in the lives of other men that they knew.
The definition of grassroots, it sounds like, right? Like something that you went through, you started, and something those men went through. Yeah, and so the organic growth there, and one of the things that has struck and impacted me so much is the weekend is very impactful, and I've seen that through hundreds and hundreds of men. And at the end, right, hearing, well, what was their impact? There's a big positive impact. Just seeing it on their face, just their countenance changes at the end of that weekend.
Oh yeah.
But then the power, I think, one of the huge strengths of this is, okay, so now I want to continue my work to come back and staff. I need to keep doing that same work. And the weekend doesn't work if the staff is not doing their work and continuing to face the pain that is in my life and in my childhood and the ways in which I've protected myself from it, and then continuing to do that work. And so there isn't a, you're through and you're done. You got the stamp or the diploma. And for me, that's unique and such a beautiful thing about how that whole weekend process works for men. So it sounds like within the next year, there's enough interest for men who are willing to do that and are in a group or somewhere in that year or two.
And it seems to me that we may have done that second weekend may have been done in October, November of 2002, but I'm not positive. Then I really continued my own work by going and doing the second level men's weekend. And then I got involved with Gay and Katie Hendricks. And I did a 2-year program with the Hendricks training, starting in March 2004. And then from that, I reached out beyond doing men's work and started doing our first couples retreat in May of 2005. And then in 2006, we started a first, second level retreat, the mission retreat.
Mm.
And then in 2006, also started a 2-year program from those men who had been through the initial weekend to continue not just a weekend experience, but to be able to have a group and then be able to have second level retreats for them to be able to continue to deepen the work that they started on their initial weekend. So those were some of the things that we focused on through 2000, from 2002 through 2006.
And that whole time you're still kind of having that initial weekends for men, and
Yes.
more and more men are going through that. They're inviting, their relationships to step into those weekends. And so all that's happening at the same time that you're building and laying the foundation and figuring out these additional weekends to all come together. Wow. Okay, so there's now a 2-year program, which I've taken part of, was hugely impactful for me because I my initial weekend is amazing, and I have found that there is a half-life, to the amazingness of that weekend. That it'll make a big change, and I'll have a big surge, but yeah, there is a half-life to that, and so continuing, weekly work and checking on this and feeling like I'm spinning my wheels has all been a process of the growth through that. And so at the Crucible Project now has 4 second level weekends: mission and purpose, the sexuality weekend, and then the leadership one, the dark side and leadership 2, leading from joy. How many of those are those still being dreamed up at this point, or are those largely in place by 2009? I think that's where we left off.
So I started the 2-year program in 2006, and so those included those 4 second level weekends. Wow. Where men could go beyond their initial weekend and do things like you said, developing their, what is my purpose in life? What is my mission? Also having weekends on leadership. And then, so many of us have issues around our sexuality, and so many of us have dark sides that really come out around our sexuality. And so we wanted to be able to have a place where men could be open and honest with other men around this area of their lives that so often we had pressed down and want to talk about, didn't want to expose. So we wanted to create a safe place where men could come and be able to look at their sexuality and do that. We felt like it would really be powerful for them to be able to do that with other men and to hear other men talk about their stories around their sexuality, and that could really help them go deeper and honestly deal with those issues and begin to do deep soul work around it where they could begin to change and transform. So we started those second level weekends in 2006 and started that 2-year program in 2006, like I said.
So and I'm curious, just a little aside here, as you're starting these second level weekends, how much has that initial weekend shifted or changed or grown? Is it's still a lot of moving pieces still, right? And things are really getting concreted down, or do you think you've really found a good framework at this point for the initial weekend?
Yeah, I think by then we had things pretty well nailed down as far as what we felt like worked, what we felt like was really important, what we could put in a second level weekend. They could do their initial weekend. And these were the elements that were really powerful and important to have on that first weekend. And then we could address other issues that built on that through those second level weekends. But by then we felt like we pretty well had the pieces in place that we thought were really critical for that initial weekend.
Wow. Yeah. And so I just want to take another quick aside here and say I was in Rwanda earlier this year.
Oh,
And there was
wow.
an initiation weekend there, and the leaders that were there just kept echoing over and over, trust the weekend. The weekend works, trust the weekend. And obviously, very different culture, tremendous wounding, and still men, still the God-given soul, and all of those parts. And I have to say, having gone through that, bringing a tremendous amount of my own fear, the weekend works.
Okay. Yeah, you're saying that just
Yeah, I hope
it's
that can
just
land.
just amazing to me. I mean, it's just unbelievable to me thinking about my own brokenness and then
Mm,
hearing you share about going to Rwanda and just thinking about these men coming on the weekend and them being touched so powerfully by it. It just is so moving to hear
yeah,
that. It's
yeah,
amazing. That's
and yeah, I'll also want to at the same time say, um, the journey continues on setting up that weekend, right? There's ways to make it better, ways that will keep growing, and yet, yeah, that first framework is so strong and continuing to work. So yeah, wanted to honor you with that. So moving into 2009, we're getting closer to my time, which is not too close actually. 2016 is when I first go to a weekend. So what's in between then and when I show up at my first weekend?
like I said, the 2 year program and me investing in that, investing and developing these second level weekends. And, so there's not just an initial weekend. I feel like, by 2009, we've got that, like I said, pretty well in place. But then it's these second level weekends and it's, breaking them out and then needing to do similar things in terms of experiencing them and then meeting afterwards and talking about what worked, what didn't work, what could we do better,
Mm,
what could we improve, what tweaks could we make. Yeah, began that whole process of developing, mission retreat, sexuality, leadership, and developing those weekends, and then needing to uh, 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 grow and improve them and reach out to men and develop this whole second year program, developing groups for the men so that they not only have just these powerful weekend experiences, but then they're in a group of men who are doing this work as well and
mm-hmm.
have men to share this with and the support of leaders to be able to build into their lives. So just was so powerful to see things begin to grow through that time and through those processes of men growing and growing then from doing a weekend in February and then in the fall. And I would need to look back at the time frame in terms of how long it took us to go from 2 to 3 weekends and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But beginning to do all of that, expand and grow as men would experience this and feel like they were experiencing a powerful transformation and then wanting to build and grow on it. And then also wanting to reach out to other men in their lives
Mm-hmm.
so that they could experience the same thing.
Yeah. The size of the weekends at this point, are these still really small, intimate, 10, 12 participants and similar number of staff, or what's the size of the weekends you're able to do?
I know that it did grow from the 4 that we started with
Mm-hmm.
on the initial weekend. So I know that they grew. I'm not sure how quickly they grew and what the numbers were like. I think it was it wasn't really fast. I think it took time for it to grow. But yeah,
Yeah.
the key dynamic was that men were experiencing it and then they wanted to come back and serve on staff and then reach out to other men. So that's
Hmm.
basically how it grew. But that is a fairly slow process. It wasn't like, we grew and, we're doing 23 men on a weekend or something like that. But it wasn't poor either. It did grow from that.
Yeah, one of the reasons I was asking or curious as an encouragement. There's a number of communities that are starting up. I know in the Crucible today, and it can seem painfully slow to grow that. And my own experience has been the weekends grow as the leaders are seasoned and ready. And I did not appreciate how I appreciate now how much I wanted my leaders to be seasoned and ready when I went through a weekend, so that they could hold right support and set me up for success, but then also hold me as I'm jumping off the cliff. Yeah, and in my work, quite literally. So that process takes time. And so for all the
Yeah,
communities that are out there starting up, the building the leaders and the seasoning and the maturing and having talked with other leaders in other communities who are starting up and can feel that frustration until they get far enough in their own leadership that they're like, I now understand that when I was frustrated before, it was because I didn't even understand what I needed to be ready. And now that I understand it, it takes time. And I was so thankful for the leaders who were ready on my weekend, that I appreciate the safety that comes with that and the slow growth that is a result. But it's strong, and it's, my story would be necessary for all those pieces also, as an organization that's not going to explode because, well, it's not ready, and grows as it's ready.
John Casey comes to mind as there was a man he was actually on staff on the church that John was pastoring, and he like sent him on the weekend as like kind of this this is a task. I'll see kind of what
Mm,
happens here. And yeah, that man came and did the weekend and really touched his life powerfully. And then that kind of built some trust then with John. And then, I remember John eventually, driving all the way in from Wheaton into Chicago to be part of a men's group that
mm,
we started out of that first men's weekend, and being part of that. And John has just become such a powerful leader.
mm,
And so it's just amazing now to think back in terms of where John is now to some of those
mm,
initial times, and how Dave Connor came and did that weekend as a result of some brokenness in his life and had a powerful experience. And John kind of tested it in that way.
mm,
And then when Dave had that positive experience from the weekend, it built a bridge, I think, for John to be willing to, take a second step and jump in further. So I think
mm,
that's without, trying to be too specific, I think
mhm.
that's generally kind of how things grew as far as the Crucible project.
So a lot of men are going through it, impacted the groups, and but then also sounds like some of the leaders are starting to show up in men who are like, yeah, let me back in. How can I help grow this and move this to whatever's next?
Yes.
Um, yeah, so more and more people stepping up and helping and creating and then staffing these weekends with you, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And this is all in Chicagoland area, and so moving out of Chicagoland is probably one of the next big keystone moments.
So Barry Thomas was one of the key guys. He was an intern at Willow Creek,
Mm-hmm.
and he came in and did a weekend and had a positive experience. And then he ended up going from being an intern at Willow and he moved to Texas. So he was a pastor at a church in West Texas, and he had a desire to bring this to Texas. And as a pastor on staff at a church in Texas, he was in a position where he had influence in terms of touching and talking to other men who were in this church in Texas, and had a passion to see men go deeper in their lives. And so he really played a key role in terms of beginning to reach out to men in the church that he was involved in there, and laid the groundwork for us to come and do a weekend there in Texas. So Barry Thomas played a key role in that happening in Texas.
You mentioned that it was challenging or very challenging. You might have said so. Yeah. What were some of those challenges?
So there were staff issues. How were we gonna get? This wasn't a lecture weekend where I go down and lecture. So it's only going to work if we've got men who are on staff who can, serve other men and who are willing to build into other men's lives. There was that whole issue of staff and building a staff and having enough staff to be able to have that leadership on a weekend. And then, of course, there's also reaching out and getting enough interest for men who are willing to invest financially, invest in terms of a weekend, a Friday night through a Sunday, to be able to come and, pay the money and then do this kind of work that seems strange. What is this that, I've got to meet with this person before a weekend and be interviewed by them, and they're asking me these questions that they're asking me about coming to a weekend. This is really different and something strange. And so there needs to be that bridge of trust that's developed to men so that they're willing to invest in financially, invest in terms of time, invest in terms of the emotional work that's involved in doing this kind of weekend. So all of those bridges needed to be developed, and all of those have their challenges within them.
Yeah, I think that's another encouragement to the communities that are, that are starting up and have those same challenges. We want to have a weekend here, but we don't have enough staff, and without people who've gone through the weekend, you can't get staff, and then you need a certain critical mass to fill things up, and all the challenges of just starting a new community. I honor all the men who are spending their time and money and resources in doing this right now. So from spreading to one other state, when does it kind of go multi-state, or at what point do you start to get the sense of like, I've been doing it a certain way, this is the way I know how to do it, and maybe there needs to be more growth, revolution, or maybe there's a different way to bring this weekend to more men, because eventually it's not just you running all the weekends around the world, right? So what's that kind of shift look like?
It just takes time to do this kind of thing. I just can't talk to a man, give him information, and then, he's ready. He needs to get to a point where he's willing to do this kind of work, and so that took time, and it took other men. Like there was men like Judson Poling and Carl Sutter. Carl ended up moving to Colorado. Judson eventually later also, moved Colorado. It took men like that who
Mm,
had come and done a weekend and helped led the weekend and believed in the work and what they had experienced. And then they wanted to, pass that on. And so people like Judson and Carl were incredibly invaluable, and Barry Thomas were incredibly invaluable to taking this to Texas and to Colorado. And
mm,
without those kind of men who were spreading it, it would not have, and who were willing to do their own work, and
mm.
men who had a passion to take this on and reach out to other men in their lives and in their worlds, Texas, Colorado. Yeah, it wouldn't have expanded and
Mm.
grown like it did.
Yeah, the weekend kindled a fire within those own men to expand it. Then, yeah, things, at least in Colorado, were really growing at capacity of growth or beyond the capacity of growth. Um, it was growing, as fast as it could there. And I think that's also a time when there was kind of another shift or another evolution of men who knew how to do the work. And then I think it went from like Greg's ministry and other men are helping and doing these things to, hey, we need to start a new thing or change this organization or something like that into the Crucible Project. And so it seems there would be some amount of that some emotions would come up for you.
Yeah, so there certainly is some letting go and involved in, leading and not needing to be the main star, if
Mm,
you will,
mm,
that it's not about me and my ego. This is about changing the lives of men. And what's going to help us be able to have the biggest impact on the lives of men. And it's not about me. Am I willing to move aside, get out of the way, so that it's not about me, but it's about the transformation of men's lives, their
mm,
families, their communities. That's what's most important here. So certainly there was ego involved for me. I don't want to say that there's not.
mm,
And there's also clear to me that if I really want to be a good, powerful leader, it's about letting go and releasing
mm,
and not holding on. And it's about building into the lives of other men and supporting them and doing all that I can to support them so that more men's lives can change. Because if I do this, that's going to slow leadership.
mm,
And it's also going to get in the way of seeing these men who have come and had this initial experience and then have come and done second level weekends. It's also going to impact their growth and their transformation as leaders. And so,
mm,
do I want to make it about me and my ego? And do I need to shine more brightly? Or is it about building into the lives of others and supporting them to be able to be the best that they can be so that they can pass it on and impact the lives of other men as well? Because if I don't do that, it's going to slow the impact and make it smaller. And so that became clear to me. It's
mm.
not about me. It's about really caring about the lives of other men and truly wanting this to grow and expand so that more men's lives can be impacted like my life was. And I'm
Mm.
not hindering it by allowing my ego to get in the way.
Thank you for sharing that. I was trying to couch that question and leave it open, and you really went there. I can hear the mix of wanting that impact to spread, but yeah, also some amount of grief would be my word, and letting that go. And let me just point out what a beautiful, powerful thing it is to hear the man who started this work continuing to do his work, right? Your journey continued all the way through that up until empowering the other men around you to take it and continue to grow and evolve it. My story would never have gotten off the ground if your ego wasn't there to be a part of all that hard work. I want to honor you for that And I think that's right around the time I was coming in and didn't really know any of this, but thank you again for sharing that. I think your hopes have largely come true. Letting go and letting other men pick it up has helped expand it. My story would be from what I can see in my limited perspective of the leadership, there's absolutely no way one man could ever hope to expand this or to grow it. And for all of us, and I want to say this for myself, for me, to get out of the way of what God is doing with this work and be a part of it and make sure I'm not in the way, but a part of it.
Yes, I think of how Crucible Project grew much further under Chris Cleghorn's leadership than it did under mine, and how he brought his leadership skills in and just did an incredible job of leading the ministry to a whole nother level. And, now Roy Wooten is doing a great job. So, I have my skills, and I would like to think that those skills have certainly made an impact. And I don't have everything. And I think of men like Chris and then Roy, who've come in and helped the Crucible Project just grow and expand to other levels. And just am so grateful to see God do that under their leadership and to see the complementary skills, leadership skills they have that have enabled Crucible to go to that whole nother level.
I absolutely would echo that. Both Chris and Roy, I'm one of thousands, and I have felt really their leadership as they come out of their way to just bless me and connect with me. And I see them do that with all the men around them. I honor that leadership because leadership is my next big frontier. And, stepping out and doing maybe up to my ankles for some men, I feel whelmed for the amount of leadership I'm doing. A lot of room to grow there. I wanted to ask, and we don't have to go, too far into it. I know we're getting near the end of our time here, about the Dare to Soar. Because as I was processing this with my wife, she said, I absolutely see in you the difference of the Crucible Project, and I wouldn't be doing what we're doing in our life without it, and she wouldn't be doing the work that she's doing. It is contagious in that way. And so I invited her to a weekend, and things lined up, and as it happens, she's now the co-president of the Woman Within in Colorado, because she is just such a fantastic person and leader. And so, the two of us, I think her first taste was in your Dare to Soar couples weekend. And that was kind of her first taste and where we had both come together with that. So very curious as to, what that journey's like.
I mentioned Hendricks before, and Gay and Katie Hendricks. And so as part of my continued growth, I got involved with the Hendricks Institute and got involved in doing my own work. And then they do a lot with couples. So got involved and learned a lot about working with couples through them, and, was doing my own work through them. And then Tony and I did couples retreat with them. And I had all the wounding in terms of me as a boy around my manhood, but also with the 4 divorces that were between my 2 parents. There was also a lot of hurt around marriage and a lot of doubts and questions on whether or not I would be able to build a deep and lasting relationship with my wife, Tony. And so there was a deep desire and passion for me to do work, just not on being a man, but also work related to how to build a deep, lasting relationship with my wife. And so that was some of the things that were going underground for me to also want to work with couples. Yeah, we did our first couples retreat back in 2005. And from there, we slowly began to work with couples. And there certainly was overlap between men that I did work with on men's retreats. And then at the end of our men's retreat, we would do the whole transition of the weekend. And some of it was to mention for those of you men who are married or are getting married and have interest in doing work around this. My wife and I also provide work for couples. So during that transition on the men's weekend, we would mention it. So then that built a bridge to be able to start to do work with men who also wanted to dive in and do work with their wife. Yeah, that's how that started back in 2005. Jay, you bringing these things up and asking about them, it just, touches, brings me to tears. Thinking about privilege I've had to do this men stuff and then, begin to work with couples. So it just touches my heart deeply to think about the honor and privilege I've had to work both with men individually and then with couples.
Yeah, I'm glad. Thank you for going there, first of all, and glad to be a part of that, to bring that up for you. My story is, this is something I do as a volunteer, right? And every time I get into it, it's so good, but I find myself kind of in orbit, and I'll get a little bit of ways, and then I come back to it, I'm like, oh yeah, oh man, it's so good. And then life spins me off a ways until I can get back towards it. So I'm happy to be part of your orbit and bring this back to your heart.
Oh, thank you, Jerry.
One more open-ended question, and then whatever else you might want to say. But from where you sit and what you see evolving into the future, is there anything that comes up for you as to, as it continues to evolve and to grow?
Gratitude. Yeah, I've gotten to a place where I have wanted to step aside, retire. Tony and I have decided we are not doing couples retreats anymore. And, it's been a while since I've also been on a men's weekend. I'm at that point in my life where it's time to pass it on, and me now to allow others who have done this and have a passion for it to step into it and to take it to that whole next level. And I'm at a place where I'm content to now step aside and don't want to be on that ground level of leading. Certainly, this conversation has brought it back, just how grateful I am for the impact it's had on others' lives. And it takes a lot of work and energy to do that. And, I'm at a place where I don't have that drive and energy to be able to continue to do it. And so now I'm grateful for others who want to step into it and take it on from here so that men's lives continue to be changed and transformed, as well as marriages and couples' lives. But I'm not going to be the one on the front line to do that anymore.
I'm excited for the next step in your journey. And so grateful that I get to just reflect back to you how impactful this really is, and to move into the next steps of your journey. And so any final things you wanted to say or leave the Crucible audience with as we wrap up our time here?
I'm grateful for you men and you the couples who have you all that have stepped in and are willing to do this work, for how it's transformed my life and how it's changed yours. I'm grateful for you and grateful that you are here to be able to take this, and that there are those of you who are even better leaders and have abilities and skills that I don't have, and will be able to take this on and continue to make a difference in the world. So I'm glad that though it's time for me to step aside, that there are those of you who will be able to take this on and be able to continue to make a difference in the world. So thank you for your passion, for your desire to continue to grow and touch the lives of other individuals and men and couples so that they can experience this transformation, so this world can be a better place as a result of doing this work in their lives and in their marriages.
Thank you for that. All right, last selfish question that came up for me. Thank you so much for those words. And I wonder if you have anything. Some of the people listening to this podcast will not have gone and done their own weekend. And thinking all the way back, to your journey and I'm thinking of words like, legacy and impact. Do you have anything you'd like to offer for men and women who are considering doing their own first step into a weekend?
Just want to encourage you to take the first step. It's a journey, as you just said, Jay. And it's been a journey of years for me. And a journey begins with one step. And so I encourage you to take that step. So whatever you're aware of, whatever's going on, what's the next step that you can take to continue your journey, to deepen your journey, to be that better man, to have that better marriage. You don't have to figure it all out. You don't have to know what the last step is. Take 5 steps. Just what's that next step that can help you grow to be that better man, to have that better relationship with your partner, and take that step. And then after you take that one step, then stop, consider, and what might be the next step for you after that. But you don't have to figure all of that out. I could have never figured all of this out. So I encourage you just to take that one step at this point and do that, and then pause and ask yourself, so where am I now? And what might be the next step for me to go on from here to be that better man, to have that better relationship with my partner. So that's what I would encourage you to do, because I could have never done this. Would have been way too overwhelming for me to think about. And so it was important for me just to take it a step at a time and see God work and see God take me from one step to the next. And that's how we all grow.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for that. It is simple and profound. I want to thank you so much, Greg, for your time, for your work, and appreciate it and enjoy this conversation so much.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you for reaching out to me. I appreciate you for your time and for reaching out to me to have this conversation.
All right.
Bless you, brother.
Bless you.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening, and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Also, don't forget to check out myjourney2.com for your free 2-week trial. That's myjourneyto.com. Thank you for listening.